Welcome to season two, episode two of Four Questions with. Today I'm joined by Tom Allen Stevens, the founder of the British On-Farm Innovation Network. So, Tom, my first question for you is, how did you get into the agricultural sector?
Well, I'm a farmer myself, James. So, third generation farmer here in Farringdon, in Oxfordshire. So, I took over from dad in the mid 90s. And then, fairly shortly after that, branched out into journalism. I've carried on being a farmer all the time and look after the farm here. It's contracted out. That was the end of the 90s. Joined the Farmers Weekly group as an arable reporter, and spent many years going around farms, doing various stories with farmers over the years, and also more recently with Crop Production magazine as well. I spent a time in PR, in agricultural PR for an agricultural PR agency as well, which was a learning experience in itself actually. But it was I've had a thoroughly enjoyable time as a journalist. The best thing about it is that you only get to see the best farms, really. If you're an agricultural journalist, and it's a huge privilege to do so, to just rock up on their farm, ask them all sorts of probing questions, and so on. And they're very good. I mean, farmers are fantastic at sharing their knowledge. It's as I say, it's a huge privilege, and what a wealth of knowledge we've got as well in our farmers. I don't think we fully appreciate actually as a nation or as an industry even just how knowledgeable our farmers are and the varied knowledge as well, the wealth of experience that we have collectively in our farmers, especially the ones that I went to meet. As I say, it was a huge privilege. I met a huge number of farmers. And it's a learning experience in itself. It really is. So that's really where things went. I spent many years as a journalist, but still carry on with the farm at home.
No, that's good. I agree with you. Like with the farmers, they are very inventive, intuitive, and working on ideas and trials that potentially could be an asset to the industry. And that leads on very nicely into where do you see the industry heading in the future? And being the founder of the British On-Farm Innovation Network, you must have some interesting ideas on this topic.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the that was one thing I realized, by the way, when I was going around all these farms as a journalist. I realized that a lot of them were doing their own on-farm trials. But it's not as if they were being done in any coordinated way. I mean, again, as an agricultural journalist, I spent a lot of time going to small plot trials, the likes of Hutchinson's and Agri, and the very good work that they do. It's all coordinated around the country, and then there's the AHDB trials as well, the recommended list trials, disease trials, and so on and so forth. Frequently visiting those trials and seeing the very good structured work that they do, and the knowledge that that they help get out to farmers. And of course, the on-farm trials is an extraordinarily important part of that. And that's what I picked up from the farmers. They said, look, it's all very well, these small plot trials, but in my experience, what I need to do is test the same thing on my own farm, my own soils, my own situation, my own climate, and everything, my own crops, my own system. And that's when you get a true picture of what a particular, whether it's a pesticide or a biostimulant or a seed dressing, or a management practice like intercropping or something like that, relay cropping, for example. And the wealth of trials that I saw farmers doing around the country, I thought, this is knowledge. This is growth. This is like a whole new area. You've got all these small plot trials going on, and I don't know how many millions of pounds are invested in small plot trials, but it must be pretty substantial. But then you've got this massive belt of farm. Well, I say massive. It's actually only a niche. I don't think more than about, I don't know, let's say 10 to 20% of farmers do on-farm trials in any form, shape or form. But it is, if you bring it all together, that is a massive wealth of knowledge and experience that we're simply not tapping into at all. And that's what, sorry, that's what led to the very long answer to a short question, James. But that's what led to the British On-Farm Innovation Network for me. It was this, we could do so much with this body of farmers. And it's not necessarily about, I mean, I think the farmers are up for it as well. You sit farmers down in a room and get them discussing, especially these progressive types, the pioneers, as I call them. And I tell you, the conversations you have are just brilliant. In terms of once they start talking about the plant signaling pathways and how can we, get better relationships with the soils and the roots and so on and so forth. And then, what can we do? How can we manipulate nitrogen timings and fungicides and, how can we reduce the dependence on pesticides and blah, 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 blah. Use beetles and our beneficials better. And things like that. The conversations you have are just invigorating. And that's the thing. If you can capture that knowledge and bring it out into the open, and make more use of it. People learn from it. The thing is, that's the other thing about this. Farmers learn best from other farmers. So a farmer is not going to take something, a new practice onto their farm until they've seen another farmer doing it. But someone has to be the first farmer to actually do it so that other farmers can learn from it. And that is the problem. That is in my view, James, that is the number one problem in the industry, that no one recognizes those pioneer farmers and the good job that they do to bring those new practices onto farm. So the rest of people can, take on those new practices and build agricultural growth. That's what it's all about. So that's really what's behind BOFIN. Did I answer your question? I'm not entirely
I
sure.
think I think you did answer the question in terms of where the industry is heading. It's heading in a direction where innovation is key to success, and you
Yep.
need, as you say, the pioneers to stand out from the crowd, put their hand up and go, let me try this, see
Yeah.
if this works on my farm. Because as we know, each farm has their own unique ecosystem, whether that be soil systems, crops they can plant, management systems, and also the size dictates what is possible on a farm.
And actually, addressing your question in full, you said where is the industry heading? Well, I'll tell you where it's heading. It's plateauing, or it's plateaued actually, and that is a real problem. So if you look at the curves that DEFRA produces and so on agricultural productivity growth, we have among the worst growth in our agricultural sector in the whole of the world. In the developed nations, at least anyway, certainly in Europe. And you just think to yourself, why? And this has been going on for quite some time. It's nothing new. It's nothing to do with Brexit or anything like that. It's been going on for some time. And yet we have an agricultural sector that is one of the best in the world. The expertise that we have in our research organisations around the country, John Innes Centre, Rothamsted, James Hutton Institute, and all of those, Harper Adams, and so on. The wealth of knowledge that we've got there and the expertise, cutting edge science going on there. It really is absolutely world class. And yet we've got this sluggish agricultural productivity growth. And you think, why? That can't be right. I think I did a bit of a fag packet calculation the other day, James. I was trying to work out how much we actually spend on agricultural research in this country. And would you like to hazard a guess at what it is?
I would say in the hundreds of millions, maybe. That's a like
Yep.
low hundreds of millions is my
Well,
guess.
I think it's more than that, actually. Okay, so DEFRA spend around between 300 and 400 million per year. And I think bestest industry estimates suggest that private industry spend sort of roughly the same amount. So that could be up to 800 million pounds spent per year on agricultural research. I mean, that's massive. The entire agricultural budget is 2.4 million. Which is so we're spending the equivalent of a third of the agricultural budget. Sorry, the 2.4 million obviously isn't all about agriculture spend. So we're spending eight, let's say we're spending 800 million on research, both private and public, and yet the agricultural productivity growth is that sluggish. That can't be right. Something's gone wrong there. There's a fundamental failure in the system. And I honestly believe it's because people just haven't recognized how to get that research out to farmers. Everyone talks about the valley of death and so on. And sometimes, really unfairly, they blame farmers. They say farmers don't want to change. Farmers do want to change. Farmers are very open to change, but they need to be absolutely certain when they take it on. I mean, if you think about it, an arable farmer, for example, you get one opportunity per year to assess the change that you've made. You know, you could put in place, I don't know, 5 or 6 quite major changes, and then the crunch point comes at harvest, where you assess whether it works. So that's 1 point per year you can assess it, and that's a big decision you've got to make. In order to do it, and that's why people do on-farm trials. You know, try it on a small area before rolling it out to the whole farm. But so that's a farmer. You know, it takes a year. You can only really do one change per year to see where you're going. If you're a widget maker, you can make a change in the morning, and you'll know by the afternoon whether it's made a difference. The other thing about farming is that there's no first mover advantage in farming. So if you're the first to bring in a new pioneering solution or something. In most other industries, you get all the glory for that. You get first in the market, you get the uplift, the premium products, and so on. You don't get that in farming, not at all. Where is the premium for innovation? It doesn't exist. So why on earth should farmers innovate in the first place? Why should they share their innovation? What's the incentive? Until you actually build that incentive in, then farmers aren't going to be pioneers. You're not going to get the new research coming onto farm, this wealth of new research coming onto farm, and you're not going to get the agricultural productivity growth.
No,
That's it.
I agree with that, but I also think when it comes to like innovation and putting in place these steps, it's also farmers have to think about the monetary side of things when it
Yeah,
comes to that. Because if they put in, for example, 50 grand for an innovation to their crop to potentially make their crop better, more efficient, um, but it fails, that's £50,000 down the drain. And especially with
absolutely.
no
Yeah.
farm subsidy, there's very, as we know with farms, there's a very limited cash flow and operating budget per year.
Yep. And you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. In fact, it was in Minette Batter's report as well in the Farm Profitability Review that farmers are expected to take on all of the risk of the new innovations and none of the reward. And hence we are in this mess. We're in this agricultural productivity slump. And it's a real problem. It's a real problem for society because if you don't get agricultural productivity growth, it's the same in the economy. If you don't get growth in the economy, then you're just going to get, expenses will ramp up, and everyone gets poorer. Basically, it's the same in agriculture that so food prices are going to continue to rise because until we get agricultural productivity growth, until we get the people being able to produce more per acre, per head of stock or whatever, than they are at the moment, until that starts going up, food prices will continue to rise. And let's face it, the costs of producing food are rising much faster than the cost of food itself. And so that is only going to get worse and worse and worse until we sort out this agricultural productivity growth problem that we have in this country. And that comes down to supporting those pioneer farmers. You mentioned the monetary aspect there. Now, it has to be said, DEFRA are recognizing this and they are addressing it to their credit, actually. They're the only people in the entire industry who have actually recognized this, that farmers can do research. So they're very much supporting it with the Farming Innovation Programme. And also with Adopt, which is the new, this is accelerating development of practices and technologies. It's the new fund that they've introduced. They put 20.6 million. I hope they're going to announce some more money for it. I mean, it has to be said, it's peanuts compared to, we talked about the 800 million. It's peanuts that's going into these programs, really. And it's not just supporting farmers, it's supporting researchers and so on. But they are really, really good programs. Believe me, especially Adopt. It's a really, really good program. It needs more money. It's way oversubscribed. But there are some really good schemes coming out with these that are supporting these pioneer farmers at last to take research onto farm. It's a fantastic things going on. It's jaw-dropping. It really is.
No, I think it's good. You just have to have our fingers crossed that there's not the usual DEFRA red tape that could potentially spoil it all.
Oh, yes. Oh yes, there's red tape, all right. Don't
Oh,
worry about that,
wonderful.
James. But the advantage with Adopt in particular, I can tell you, any farmer who has personally got involved with the Farming Innovation Program has found it's an absolute toxic environment. So it's DEFRA funded, and it's run by Innovate UK, and they have their systems, they have their ways of doing it, and so on. But it's not the right environment for farmers. Farmers like to get on with doing research on their own farms and not have to worry about all the bureaucracy and so on. But oh my God, they lace it up with bureaucracy. So it should be. It's taxpayers' money and so on. So there has to be
No,
accountability
totally
and
understand.
so on. But what they've done with Adopt, and this is the really clever bit, is that you have to get a facilitator involved in your Adopt fund. That's what we do at BOFIN. So we've got five projects now, five major projects, total of about £14.5 million. These are projects within the Farming Innovation Programme. And so, that's our bread and butter, dealing with Innovate, understanding the rules, the way they like to work, and so on and so forth. What is an eligible cost? What isn't an eligible cost? How they like it to be reported, and so on and so forth. That's what we do day in, day out. And we've got some really clever people on the team now who know exactly what they're doing. And also managing farmers as well and helping them manage their own trials. So we facilitate for Adopt, and we're that buffer between the farmer and their funding. So the farmer just has to think about getting on with the trial, getting the data that they want, sharing it, and so on, doing all those bits. We do all the reporting and the accountability and so on, and help them on that side, so they don't have to worry about Innovate UK.
No, that's very good to hear. So moving on to my third question for you is, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think you have the courage of your own convictions and don't be worried about knockbacks. But also learn, learn from others, and listen. I mean, I don't think necessarily I didn't do any of those things, but I think the most productive years of my life have been when you open your ears and you listen to what other people have to say, and but at the same time, don't be afraid to put forward your point of view. Don't be afraid to question. That's one of the most important things, especially as a journalist. I mean, obviously, all journalists have to ask questions, but there's no such thing as a stupid. Well, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Everyone says that, but actually, the stupidest question is the one that was never asked. And so you should never be afraid to ask the stupid question. I think that's probably one of the single most important lessons to learn, and challenge and so on. But don't be afraid of the knockbacks. If you put ideas forward and you get them knocked back, when you're young, you're constantly knocked back. You get more listened to when you get old. People seem to judge a good idea by the number of grey hairs you have on your head. I feel sometimes, which is probably a bit unfair, and it shouldn't be the way necessarily. But don't be afraid to put forward your suggestions, but equally, don't be afraid of the knockbacks and learn from what you hear. Um, I think, and as I say, yeah, ask the stupid question. Those are the two main things that I'd say to my younger self. I think, mind you, I think I did that anyway. But those are the things that have put me in good stead, I suppose. Again, it comes back to this privilege of being able to visit farms. And as a journalist, you have to ask the stupid questions. You have to make sure that you completely understand, because you are representing the farmer's view and the farmer's viewpoint. You have to make sure that you completely understand what that viewpoint is, so that you can properly represent it. So you have to ask the stupid questions. You cannot make assumptions. You have to get them to say, exactly how they feel. Even if you think, you have to get them to say it, and so that you can capture it and you can convey their views. So you have to ask the stupid, obvious questions.
No, I think those are good pieces of advice to give your younger self, but also for people out there. So my final question for you is, if you were head of DEFRA, what would be your first order of business?
Well, support those pioneering farmers. First of all, to be fair, they're doing that. I think all credit to be honest, it was the previous government that set this in motion. I think we got a lot to thank George Eustice for and Michael Gove. I know that they get bad press and so on, but actually, they did a bloody good job when they were in government. And the things that they set in train, oh gosh, the precision breeding bill, for example, what a glorious piece of legislation. I know that there are people out there in the organic side and anti-GM and so on and so forth who think it's ghastly. But personally, if you look at it objectively, it's a glorious piece of legislation, and exactly what we can now do with Brexit and so on. But I think DEFRA set themselves on the right track with what they did, for example, with the Part Farming Innovation Program and so on, and where they went with that. I know things have ballsed up slightly with ELMS and SFI, and they've got to do a recheck now with the new government and things. But I think they are heading in the right direction. The way they're doing it, they need to put more money into research. I think divert more of the budget towards productivity growth and less just towards funding the environment. I think needs to happen. And you can do, and this is what's come out with Minette Batter's review, you can do productivity growth and environmental resilience and so on at the same time. That's where we should be focusing our funds. And they've so her review has come up with this brilliant thing called Soil Shot, where it looks at a soil not as an environmental resource, but a source of productivity resilience or something like that. So how can we look after our soils in a way that not only protects the environment but also protects our industry for its long-term future? And that is down to not just recognizing its environmental value as a carbon store and all of those sorts of things, but also its ability to really drive productivity. And we can do both with our soils, and that's the thing. And our farmers do that. We're doing a lot of research in that area, and we're finding that you really can do both. It's the holy grail, and it's all in our soils. We've got it. Every single farmer has got it in bucket loads on their farm. It's just a question of turning that resource into this brilliant. And this is the thing, you see. Everyone looks at agricultural productivity growth and they say, oh, things have plateaued, or my soil health has plateaued, and so on. Bollocks! I don't think it's plateaued at all. I think that if we actually combine really good science with really good farmer knowledge, especially in soils, then we could build the most. There's no plateau, there's no ceiling at all, especially with some of the new technologies that are coming through, and we could really drive productivity, but at the same time safeguard our environment, bring down carbon emissions and so on. The secret is definitely there. We just have to unleash it. We just have to unleash the knowledge. And that's about scientists working together with farmers. And that's sorry. So the actual question, what's the advice to DEFRA? The advice to DEFRA is to put more money into that area. And in fact, actually, the Minette Batter's productivity review says exactly that. So let's support farmers and scientists together to take up this opportunity. It's a wealth of opportunity, and I honestly think that we haven't even begun to understand. We're at the tip of the iceberg of our understanding of the soils. And as soon as we start to realize, we open our eyes and we actually capture and measure and so on what we can do with our soils, we will suddenly realize this wealth of opportunity that we've got to really, drive up productivity growth and bring down carbon emissions and all the other problems that we've got. We're on the start of that journey. It's a really exciting one.
No, I think that's a good first order of business. That investment in innovation, increasing productivity, while also being environmentally sustainable. I think that's a very good answer. So, Tom, thanks for joining me, and we will see everyone on the next episode.